The conference room went silent when Daniel Carter placed his resignation letter on the polished black table. His wife, Victoria Carter, stared at the envelope. Then she laughed. Not nervously, not sadly. She actually laughed. "You're resigning?" Victoria asked. Daniel looked at her calmly. "Yes." Victoria leaned back in her chair, surrounded by 12 board members and 3 senior executives. "From my company?" Daniel's eyes remained steady. "From the company I helped build." Her smile disappeared for a half-second. Then she laughed again. "Daniel, you haven't had a real position here for years." Several executives exchanged uncomfortable looks. Daniel slowly pushed the letter across the table. "You're right." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "That was easy. I didn't say you were right about everything." The room became colder. Victoria folded her arms. "You think walking away is some kind of threat?" "No." "Then what is it?" Daniel stood. "It's a resignation." Victoria smiled. "You'll be back in a week." Daniel looked directly at her. "I won't." She shook her head. "You don't understand how this works. This company is worth nearly $2 billion. You're walking away from everything." Daniel's voice remained quiet. "No, I'm walking away from something." Victoria's expression hardened. "Your pride." "My marriage." The room froze. Victoria's face changed. "Don't do this here. You brought our marriage into the company years ago." "That isn't fair." Daniel gave a faint smile. "Neither was finding out that my own wife had been planning to remove me from the company before asking me to sign the documents." Victoria stood. "Who told you?" Daniel didn't answer. That was the first thing that frightened her. She knew Daniel. For 10 years, she had watched him avoid unnecessary fights. He never shouted, never threatened, never competed for attention. And that was exactly why she had underestimated him. "Daniel," she said quietly, "if you're trying to punish me, this is childish." He picked up his coat. "I stopped trying to punish you a long time ago." He walked toward the door. Behind him, board member Richard Hale suddenly spoke. "Mr. Carter." Daniel stopped. Richard looked toward Victoria, then back at Daniel. "May I ask why you're resigning today?" Daniel turned. "Because today was the first day I realized I wasn't leaving anything behind." Richard's eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" Daniel smiled faintly. "You'll understand soon." Then he left. Victoria stared at the closed door. For the first time that afternoon, she wasn't laughing. Richard slowly picked up Daniel's resignation letter. He read the first page. Then his face went pale. "Victoria." "What?" Richard looked at her. "Did you know Daniel owns the patents behind the company's 3 most profitable products?" Victoria froze. "What?" Richard placed the letter down. "He doesn't own them personally anymore." "Then who does?" Richard swallowed. "That's the problem." Victoria grabbed the document. At the bottom was a single sentence. "All intellectual property developed by Daniel Carter has been transferred to Carter Strategic Holdings, effective immediately." Victoria's hands began to shake. Outside the building, Daniel entered a waiting black sedan. His phone rang. He answered. "It's done," said a man's voice. Daniel looked back at the glass tower where his wife still stood. "Good. Are you sure you're ready?" Daniel's expression hardened. "I've been ready for 3 years." He ended the call, and for the first time since his marriage began falling apart, Daniel smiled, because Victoria believed he had just resigned from her company. She had no idea he had just walked away with the one thing she could never replace. 3 years earlier, Carter Global had been nothing more than an ambitious technology startup. Victoria had been the public face. Daniel had been the architect. "You need investors," Daniel had told her back then. Victoria had laughed. "I need someone who believes in me." "I do." "Then don't tell me what I need." Daniel smiled. "Fine. Tell me what you need." "You." He had believed her. That was his mistake. Over the next 5 years, Victoria became CEO while Daniel quietly built the company's technology infrastructure. He didn't care about titles. "You should be on the board," Richard once told him. Daniel shook his head. "Victoria built the brand. Let her lead." Richard disagreed. "You built the engine." Daniel smiled. She drives it better. But success changed Victoria. Slowly. At first, it was longer meetings, then secret dinners, then unexplained absences. Finally, Daniel discovered something worse. Victoria wasn't simply pushing him away. She was replacing him. One evening, Daniel walked into her office. "Who is Marcus?" Victoria looked up sharply. "What?" "The consultant you've been meeting. He's helping with expansion." "Without telling me?" Victoria sighed. "Not everything has to go through you." Daniel stared at her. "I don't need everything to go through me." "Then stop acting like you do." He lowered his voice. "I've been trying to save this company." Victoria stood. "No, Daniel. You've been trying to control it." "That isn't true." "Then why does everyone come to you?" "Because they trust me." The words escaped before he could stop them. Victoria's eyes hardened. "Exactly." Daniel frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means they should be trusting me." He realized then that this wasn't about business. It was about insecurity. Victoria didn't hate Daniel. She hated how naturally people listened to him. That insecurity became dangerous when Marcus Reed entered the picture. Marcus was polished, ambitious, and always agreed with Victoria. Daniel warned her, "You're giving him too much access." Victoria laughed. "Maybe that's because he actually supports me." Daniel nodded slowly. "Maybe." He didn't argue again. Instead, he started documenting everything. Every patent, every contract, every original design, every investment, every transfer. Not because he wanted revenge. Because Daniel had learned one painful truth. Trust without protection was not loyalty. It was vulnerability. Then came the board meeting that changed everything. Victoria presented a restructuring plan. Daniel will move into an advisory role. Daniel looked at the presentation. "And if I refuse?" Victoria didn't look at him. "Then we'll have to reconsider your position." Richard interrupted. "Daniel helped create half of this company's intellectual property." Victoria replied, "And he will be compensated." Daniel looked around the room. "How much?" Victoria hesitated. $5 million. Several board members looked uncomfortable. Daniel almost laughed. $5 million. Victoria frowned. "You've never cared about money." "I still don't." "Then what's the problem?" Daniel leaned forward. "The problem is that you think that's what I'm worth." Silence. He stood. "I'll sign." Victoria looked surprised. "Really?" "Yes." He picked up the documents. "But I'll need 30 days. "For what?" "To finish my obligations." Victoria smiled. "Take 60. Daniel nodded. "Thank you." He walked out. Richard followed him. "What are you doing?" Daniel stopped. "Leaving." "You're surrendering." "No." Daniel looked at him. "I'm making sure she understands what she actually owns." Richard studied his face. "You already moved the patents, didn't you?" Daniel said nothing. Richard's eyes widened. "How long?" Daniel finally answered. 3 years. Richard whispered. "Why?" Daniel looked toward Victoria's office. "Because 3 years ago, I realized my wife loved being CEO more than she loved being my wife." Daniel expected Victoria to be angry. He didn't expect her to destroy his reputation. 2 days after his resignation, Marcus appeared on television. "Carter Global has entered a new era," Marcus announced. "We've removed outdated internal structures and restored confidence." The reporter smiled. "What about Daniel Carter?" Marcus paused. Daniel made significant contributions years ago, but his involvement had become increasingly difficult for the organization. Daniel watched the interview from his apartment. His younger brother, Ethan, stared at the television. "They're blaming you." Daniel switched it off. "I know. You're just going to sit here? For now." Ethan shook his head. "You built that company." Daniel looked down. "I built part of it." "You built the part that makes money." Daniel remained silent. Then his phone buzzed. A message from Victoria. "We need to talk." Daniel deleted it. Another message arrived. "Please." He stared at the screen. Then another. "I never wanted this to happen." Daniel finally replied. "Neither did I." No response came. That night, Daniel opened an old photograph. It showed Victoria standing beside him on the day they launched their first product. She was laughing. He remembered what she had said. "We're going to change everything." Daniel whispered, "We did." Then he put the photograph away. The next morning, he received a call from Richard. "Daniel, something is wrong." "What?" "The board approved Marcus's restructuring plan." Daniel frowned. That's what Victoria wanted. "No, you don't understand." Richard lowered his voice. "They're selling our research division." Daniel stood immediately. "To whom?" "Marcus's investment group." Daniel's face changed. "That's illegal." "I know." "Then why did the board approve it?" "Because Victoria signed." Daniel closed his eyes. For the first time, anger appeared in his voice. "She sold the company to the man who helped push me out." Richard said nothing. Daniel walked toward his desk. "Send me the documents." Minutes later, they arrived. Daniel read every page. Then he noticed something strange. A clause buried near the bottom. He read it twice, then a third time. "Richard." "Yes." "Did Victoria read this?" "I assume so." "No." Daniel's voice became cold. "She didn't." "What'd you find?" "Marcus doesn't own the investment group." Richard froze. "Who does?" Daniel stared at the signature. "Someone used a shell company." "Who?" Daniel's eyes narrowed. "I'm not sure yet." Then another document appeared. This one was older, 3 years older. Daniel recognized the signature immediately. His own. He whispered, "That's impossible." Richard asked, "What?" Daniel opened the original transfer agreement for Carter Strategic Holdings. The document stated that if Carter Global ever attempted to remove Daniel from operational control through fraudulent restructuring, the intellectual property rights would automatically become subject to a controlling trust. And the trustee was Daniel's mother. Richard stared at the screen. "Your mother died 2 years ago." "I know." "Then who is the trustee?" Daniel looked at the final page. His face went completely still. There was a replacement trustee, a person he hadn't spoken to in 12 years. His father, the man Victoria believed was dead. Daniel whispered, "Dad?" Richard's voice trembled. "Daniel, your father isn't dead." And suddenly Daniel understood. His resignation wasn't the beginning of his revenge. It was the beginning of a plan his family had started long before Victoria ever betrayed him. Daniel found his father in a quiet coastal town 3 days later. He walked into a small restaurant. An older man sat near the window. Daniel stopped. "Dad." The man slowly looked up. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then his father smiled. "You finally came." Daniel sat down. "You were alive." "Yes." "You let me believe you were dead." "I needed you to believe it." "Why?" His father looked toward the ocean. "Because your grandfather's company was stolen from us." Daniel frowned. "What does that have to do with Victoria?" "Everything." His father explained the truth. Years earlier, Daniel's grandfather had created the technology that eventually became the foundation of Carter Global. But a group of investors had tried to steal the patents. Daniel's father fought them. When the legal battle became dangerous, he disappeared. Daniel's mother protected the remaining intellectual property. Then Daniel, unknowingly, continued the work. His father had watched from a distance. "You were always the smartest person in the room," his father said. Daniel shook his head. "No, I was just patient. That's why you survived." Daniel looked at him. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wanted you to build something without carrying my war." Daniel stared at the table. "Victoria destroyed our marriage." His father sighed. "Then don't let her destroy your life." Daniel's phone rang. "Richard." "Daniel, the board is meeting tomorrow." "For what?" "To vote on removing Victoria." Daniel was silent. Richard continued. "They've discovered Marcus manipulated the financial projections. Will Victoria be removed?" "If the vote passes." Daniel looked toward his father. "Does she know?" "No." Daniel stood. "Don't stop the meeting." Richard hesitated. "Why?" "Because I'll be there." The next morning, Carter Global's headquarters was packed with reporters. Victoria entered the boardroom looking exhausted. Marcus stood beside her. "You promised me the board would support this," she whispered. "They will." Richard entered. "No, they won't." Victoria turned. "Richard?" He placed a folder on the table. "The board has requested your resignation." Victoria stared at him. "On what grounds?" "Mismanagement, undisclosed conflict of interest, and breach of fiduciary responsibility." Marcus stepped forward. "This is absurd." The doors opened. Daniel walked in. Victoria froze. "Daniel." He said nothing. Marcus laughed nervously. "You don't work here anymore." Daniel looked at him. "I know." Richard stood. "Actually, Daniel is here as a controlling representative of Carter Strategic Holdings." Victoria's face went pale. "What?" Richard placed the trust documents on the table. Daniel spoke quietly. "I'm not taking the company from you." Victoria stared at him. "Then why are you here?" "To give it back to the people who built it." She shook her head. "You planned this." "No." Daniel looked at her with genuine sadness. "I planned for the possibility that someone would eventually try to destroy what we built." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "Was our marriage part of that plan?" Daniel paused. "No." That answer hurt her more than anger would have. "Then why didn't you fight for us?" Daniel looked at her. "I did." His voice cracked slightly. "You just stopped noticing." The board began voting. One by one, the directors raised their hands. Victoria watched the count. 8, 9, 10. The final vote was Richard. He looked at Daniel, then at Victoria, and raised his hand. "Removal approved." Victoria slowly sat down. But Daniel wasn't finished. He placed another document on the table. "There's one more vote." Everyone looked at him. Daniel said, "The board will decide whether Carter Global continues under Marcus." He paused. "Or follows me into the company I built after leaving." Victoria stared at him. "You built another company?" Daniel smiled faintly. "Yes." And then the doors opened again. Every senior executive who had resigned after Daniel's departure walked into the room. Behind them stood investors, engineers, and department heads. Richard looked around. "Daniel." Daniel answered calmly. "They've already chosen." The room fell silent. Victoria looked at the people entering behind Daniel. People she had once considered loyal to her. Her former chief engineer, her head of finance, 3 regional directors, half of the research team, even Marcus's former assistant. Victoria whispered, "You all left?" The chief engineer stepped forward. "We didn't leave the company." He looked at Daniel. "We followed its founder." Victoria turned toward Daniel. "You took them from me." Daniel shook his head. "No." He looked around the room. "They made their own choice." Marcus slammed his hand onto the table. "This is corporate sabotage." Richard replied, "No, this is accountability." Marcus stared at him. "You can't do this." Richard smiled coldly. "We already did." The board voted again. This time, unanimously, Carter Global would remain independent. Daniel's new company would become its strategic technology partner, and Marcus's investment agreement was terminated. Victoria sat silently. The woman who once laughed at Daniel's resignation now looked at the empty chair beside her. Daniel approached. She looked up. "Did you ever love me?" Daniel stopped. "Yes." Her eyes filled with tears. "Then why does this feel like you hate me?" "Because you keep confusing consequences with hatred." Victoria looked away. "I thought you were weak." "I know." "I thought you couldn't survive without me." "I know." She swallowed. "Why didn't you tell me what you had?" Daniel smiled sadly. "Because I wanted you to love me without knowing what I could give you." Victoria closed her eyes. "And I failed." "Yes." The word was painful, but Daniel didn't soften it. "You did." She nodded slowly. "I don't deserve forgiveness." "No." Victoria looked surprised. Daniel continued. "But you deserve the chance to become someone who doesn't need it." She looked at him. For the first time, neither of them was fighting. There was only truth. Daniel turned toward the board. "I'm not taking Victoria's place." Richard raised an eyebrow. "Then what are you doing?" Daniel looked through the glass walls at the city below, building something better. Months later, Carter Global survived. Victoria stepped down as CEO and accepted responsibility for the decisions she had made. Marcus faced legal consequences for the fraudulent transactions, and Daniel's new company exploded into the market, but he never celebrated Victoria's downfall. Instead, he visited her once. She was sitting alone in a quiet cafe. "You came?" "Yes." "Why?" Daniel sat across from her. "To say goodbye." Victoria looked down. "I thought you'd come back." "I did come back." She looked up. "But not to you." Daniel stood. Victoria whispered, "Are you happy?" He thought for a moment. "Yes." "Without me?" Daniel nodded. "Because I finally learned something." "What?" "You can love someone deeply and still choose to leave when staying destroys who you are." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. Daniel walked toward the door. She called after him, "Daniel." He stopped. "I'm sorry." He looked back. "I believe you." Then he left. Outside, the city was beginning to wake. Daniel stepped into the morning sunlight. His phone rang. "Richard, the board wants you." Daniel smiled. "What do they want?" Richard laughed. "They want to follow you." Daniel looked toward the skyline. Years ago, he had believed losing his marriage meant losing everything. He had been wrong. Sometimes the greatest loss isn't the end of your story. Sometimes it's the moment you finally stop begging someone to value you and start building a life that doesn't require their approval. And that was the day Daniel Carter learned that walking away wasn't surrender. Sometimes resignation is the first step toward freedom.